So, we're talking about understanding education and about hidden disabilities. And this is through my nonprofit. It's Brainworks, ASBISG.org. We save this stuff, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, we put it on YouTube, and then I post it on Facebook and our website. So you can always go back and listen to it over again. And all right, we're going to go over the details. And this isn't an incredibly long one. Like we've had a couple that were big, but they're always helpful. And like I said, this is all about educating the public and informing ourselves together. This is teamwork. So that's what it's all about. So don't ever hesitate to ask a question. And nothing is stupid, nothing is irrelevant or anything like that. Okay. Understanding education about hidden disabilities. Disabilities can come from many different forms. Most people are familiar with a visible disability like a cane or a walker or a wheelchair or something like that, and physical traits that come along with, some disabilities. Like a neighbor down the street uses a wheelchair, or a friend of a friend has a guide dog, but what about someone with a disability that's not visible? An invisible disability is just as life affecting as a visible one, but they're not as talked about and easily understood. One key word I can say right off the bat: cognitive disabilities, because it's within the brain, what happens inside. What is an invisible disability anyway? Loosely defined, an invisible disability is a disability that is not immediately noticeable. They can include brain injuries, chronic pain, mental illness, gastrointestinal disorders, and much more. Because they're not obvious to spot, invisible disabilities may be overlooked and misunderstood. And unfortunately, this can lead to the discrimination or exclusion of those with an individual disability. An individual with an invisible disability may find it difficult to talk about their disability and the daily challenges they face. For example, a woman with a gastrointestinal disorder needs to continually use the restroom during working hours. The woman may be embarrassed and fears being treated differently, and people talk, that kind of thing. So she doesn't want to discuss it openly with her coworkers. It's really none of their business. Her coworkers, who are unaware of her needs, develop negative ideas and attitudes about her behavior. They lack the knowledge and information to change their perceptions and their attitudes. This lack of awareness and understanding and the resulting attitudes can hurt a person with invisible disability in many ways and limit them from reaching their full potential. Goals. You can't do anything about goals. You're getting ridiculed and you're put down and you're neglected.
Mhm.
The hidden quality of an invisible disability means there is an increased need for creating awareness and changing attitudes. Many of us talk about this kind of stuff and we understand this. I have a very close friend of mine that had Crohn's disease, and that's one of those gastrointestinal disorders that was an issue all the time, but you couldn't see it. Another one, and this one's a lot of times neglected, is MS, because you don't know when you're going to have bouts with it, and it's in the brain, and it comes and it goes, and sometimes it gets debilitating. And like I've heard countless stories about people getting ridiculed for having MS, and you can't see it, and they park in a handicap spot, and then they get out of the car and walk away, and there's a fight brewing because why are you in that spot? It's not yours. You're
Yeah.
not disabled. That along those lines.
Yeah.
Removing the social stigma involved with disclosing an invisible disability and having colleagues, teachers, employers, and others try to be more accommodating and accepting of the unique challenges faced by those with invisible disabilities can also help create more inclusive society. Because when you don't see it and let other people become aware of it, then they'll be more conscious. Going, you don't. I mean, we joke about it in the brain injury world. The community together is you never know somebody's story.
Yeah.
You never know. You never know what somebody's facing. or what's going on in their head, things like that. I just had a wonderful family that I was working with this past week, and they talked about that. And the son who had a brain injury um, never brings up his brain injury with a job that he's having. I said, "Are you kidding me? You take advantage of that opportunity." And we're going to go into detail about that. I said, because number one, it makes the business look good politically speaking, because they're helping out the community. And number two is it covers your butt. If you do something wrong, they'll have more understanding if they're knowledgeable that, okay, this guy's trying his best with a disability to improve as a better person, so they have to be more understanding. And if HR catches wind of something like that, they could have there could be some ramifications due to it. But you don't just go to your job and tell everybody you've got a disability, but something you discuss with your employer and like a human resources or management or above them if need be. Yeah, you let them know. You should let them know because it helps you. There is laws to help you. So what are some common hidden disabilities?
I'm
Anybody?
sorry, could you repeat the question?
What are some common hidden disabilities? I mentioned a couple just now.
Uh,
Cognitive.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Cognitive.
Yes.
Pain.
Pain.
Yes.
Pain management could be a disability. Sure. Yeah.
Depression.
Yeah. That could be a one. Anxiety could be one. But there's actual ailments. There's, like I mentioned, MS. There's traumatic brain injuries. There's strokes. Then aneurysms, um, hydrocephalus, encephalitis, neuropathy. So for some people, and this is in my family too, is diabetes.
Yep.
Those are all different hidden disabilities that you can't visibly see things, but they're there. Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
mhm.
Good. Here we go. Psychiatric disabilities, and this is one of them that we both touched base on. Examples include major depression, bipolar disorder. That's one that we didn't mention. Schizophrenia, anxiety disorders, PTSD, etc. There's traumatic brain injury, epilepsy, HIV and AIDS, diabetes, which I had mentioned, chronic fatigue syndrome, cystic fibrosis, ADD and ADHD, learning disabilities, and there's hundreds of different learning disabilities. Medical conditions associated with hidden disabilities. Examples include short term memory or long term memory problems, stable or progress, constant and unpredictable and fluctuating, controlled by medication and untreatable, you know, medical conditions. All play a part. And none of them are visible. They could look like the average, person. Somebody walking in a store, somebody walking down the street, somebody driving, anybody. It could be anybody. You never know anybody's story. Nobody looks at me and thinks that I've been accused of lying about my disability. And it wasn't true. My wife has 4 brain tumors, but she's educated, she's an RN, but you would never know from anybody, by looking at her that there's anything wrong with her. You just don't know. Common denominators. What do hidden disabilities have in common? This is an interesting thing. I was kind of intrigued to read up and write about this one here. One is unable to see the hidden disability, and that's regardless to what other kinds. There's no visible supports to indicate a disability, such as canes, wheelchairs, use, or sign language use. It is a permanent disability that they can cope with on a daily basis. We all have them. I'm disabled, but you never know anything because I've learned to deal with it, and I have strategies to help me get past things. And when I know to relax and chill out and, you know, control the situation instead of letting the situation control me. The disability may be managed through medication or behavior, such as the case of diabetes, asthma, epilepsy, or any psychiatric disorders. It needs to be documented. It needs to be a documented disability in order to receive reasonable accommodations under the ADA. And this is a big one because a lot of people do a little self-diagnosis of having PTSD. It's clinical. There's a whole explanation and diagnosis that goes along with that kind of thing. But anyway, that's a whole, and bipolar. That's another one because somebody has mood swings doesn't mean that they're bipolar. That's a whole nother situation and story. Um, the person is in some kind of physical pain or emotional pain. That's a common thing, you know, with all brain injuries. We lost somebody. I wonder who it was.
Ingrid, I think.
Ingrid.
Ingrid.
Oh, okay. All right. I hope it wasn't too much for her. Okay. Oh, maybe that's her back again. Good. Let's see. I got to, yeah, that was her. We lost her. She's back. Okay. See, I got to keep an eye on a whole bunch of different windows when I'm doing these. Okay. Okay. Challenges. Now, this is a big one because I just talked about this and I wanted to, this is why it's being recorded because I want to discuss these things that people don't necessarily understand. Challenges for a person with a disability, with a hidden disability, rather. Okay, let me see if I could read the top of the screen here. They may not know they have a disability and or regard themselves as such, like they don't regard themselves as somebody who's disabled. They're in doubt, you know, or in denial. Another thing, and this was me the first 5 years after I had the brain injury, they may not have been diagnosed. I wasn't diagnosed. I tried going back to work and I thought I was fine. I was released from the hospital. They told me you can go back to your job. I was unaware until I saw the depth of it with reality of life. A funny thing we just talked about, I talked about earlier just tonight, is they may not know what they need, like resources or where to go and who to talk to. They may know what they need but are unable to articulate it, you know, speaking up or word it out. They may often feel misunderstood or may feel ignored or unvalidated. That's very, very common. And it happens in a family atmosphere more often than people realize because a lot of times people are said, oh, it's in your head, get over yourself. You know, you're fine, you're fine, that kind of thing. They may often feel misunderstood or may feel ignored. Oh, I'm sorry, I just said that. Or may feel unvalidated. They may suspect something is wrong but don't know what it is or how to fix it. And that goes again if they don't understand cognitive functioning or definitions that describe what that is. It causes fatigue or pain. It causes sleep problems, seizures, incontinence, or dizziness. And that's a very common thing with a hidden disability, which I didn't mention, like concussions. They seem so mild, but the long-term effect of those concussions come back, and people interfere with concentration and stamina, including medications that are used to treat them. Because if you're having an issue with anxiety or impulse issues, they give you medication, and then you're dopey, and you can't really. It's hard to work with the day to day. Experience difficulties meeting deadlines and participating in group work. There are so many things that touches base on a lot of different areas. That's what I'm trying to say. It comes with multitasking, stress management, multitasking, goal setting, and knowing where to go and how to take your time and pace yourself. And working in groups is another social anxiety. That's another thing with the hidden disabilities.
Yeah.
Inability to arrange medical appointments or regular treatments that do not clash do not clash with classes, like appointments and other things that going on.
Mhm.
Motor coordination, hand-eye coordination, things like that functioning. People don't think that they have a problem with it, but they actually do. I know people without brain injuries that are like they have two left hands or two left feet, which is funny. But anyway, another story. Um, Another thing, and this is people without brain injuries not realizing that they have one: time management, attention, organizational skills, processing speeds. Any of us that have accepted our brain injuries know that we don't process information the same way we used to. We all know that. Well, most of us should. Some people are still better than others, but when it comes to multitasking and things like that and arranging things, you have a priority list, and that's hard. Multitasking, doing one thing at a time, and pacing yourself, all that is very, very, very hard. Another one, which is funny because I'm guilty of it, and we were just talking about this again too, is verbal expression. How you say things, not what you say, but how you say it, is a big difference when you're trying to say something. We were just joking around about today with text messages, because you shouldn't text to communicate, because you don't know tone of voice and how people are trying to say things. And of course, is the fact of memory. We all know that trouble. All right, let me see what we got here. Does anybody like to go over any things that I just said?
Well, I don't really want to go over anything you just said, but I can agree with a lot of the points that you just made as I went through my injury and recovery with the denial and all the other important aspects that you mentioned.
Anyone else?
I certainly can relate to most of the things you said in
Mhm.
regards to my brain injury.
Mhm.
Well, that's a big one. Self-assessment.
Mhm.
Part of another thing with recuperation, like being able to not recuperate. What's the word I'm looking for? Is well, it's a part of
Rehabilitate.
recuperation, but acceptance and moving forward. That kind of thing is realizing, okay, this is what I need to work on, and that comes to long-term and short-term goals that you can go for. I touched base on this next part a little bit earlier, and I'm going to go over it again. Is environmental barriers at work and at home. And this is where communication, well, there's my key word there, is so important. Stereotypes and stigma, because people don't know, or even if they do know, they'll stigmatize you, be going, oh, he's not right, or she's not right, because, oh, I know they have a disability, because they stutter, they have trouble coming up with the words, and they just look dumbfounded. That kind of thing is a stereotype. A lot of times people don't understand. I did a lot of research when I was in college after the brain injury. I ended up studying that second sentence right there, the complex nature of psychiatric disabilities. I wanted to know why the brain was working or having trouble working the way it was before, than it was before the disability. I've been always fascinated with psychiatry ever since I was a little kid. When I started having bad dreams, I didn't cry to my mom and dad about it to find out, or tell them about it. I went to school and started reading and researching. I was 8 years old, and I started studying why people have dreams the way they do. I was just always fascinated with that. But then after the brain injury, I needed to learn why we think the way we do, and of course, I start learning about how the different parts of the brain work, the left side and the right side, and each form, and how the brain also heals itself by restructuring itself after a brain injury, which is fascinating. Anyway, environmental barriers at work and at home also include access to information and services, and that's part of what I try to give and put on our website, for the organization, is a resource of information and where to ask questions, and of course, why we have weekly conference calls. And that brings us to number 4, which is coordination and communication. Nothing is more valuable than talking to each other. Nobody knows the amount of resources another person may have, and it's wonderful. We have people in our group and on these calls that have an array of different experiences since their brain injury and resources of information of where to go and who to talk to. And some of us have brain injuries that happened 50 years ago. Some of us have brain injuries that happened 5 or even a year ago. But they know resources and not cognitive. Neurology is still a learning process. 5 years ago compared to now is a huge difference. 20 years ago to now is like throwing rocks and then building a whole structure with rocks. I mean, it's just amazing how big it's become with neurology. So the more resources we share, the more we can help each other grow and help each other learn. And that's what this is all about. Teamwork. Educational support. And these are things that you could do amongst yourselves or by yourself and then, with all of us. And this is what our organization has always been about since April 2004. Academic supports like note taking, reducing a workload, time management, and taking extra time on tasks. Mental health services where they're available. If sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, people around the country, they don't know where there's resources in their areas, and we try to help dig and find stuff. Me and my wife have helped out a numerous amount of people over the last 10 years um, find resources that they didn't even know were around, in each state for people, depending on where they live, you know. And of course, there's peer support, and that's what we are, peers help each other, and that's what I was talking about before. And a big thing I love to help out with is coping skills. I talk about this all the time. It's a lot of our conversations on these conference calls are about coping skills because we decide what's going to affect us and what's not going to affect us. You know, like our attitude or how things are going to impact our emotional well-being. We decide on that. You decide if it's going to overcome you or you're going to overcome the emotion. You decide. So that's a big one. Having an open mind and where to take it from here. Here's a big one that is huge because we all need a positive environment around us for us to grow and become better people. What family and friends can do to help us. Understand that when the person is frustrated, confused, or agitated, it may be a workable moment for friends and family to work with the people with a disability. The family and friends should remain calm, since your agitation will likely make challenging situations even worse. Conflict, arguing with somebody for feeling the way they are or putting them down for anything like that is only going to add fuel to a fire. Allow the person with the disability to learn their own way because they are able. There's nothing with a person with a disability that wants to do something to actually achieving a goal, but they can do it, but they have to do it at their own pace because it's a whole learning strategy, not psychologically. It's not about IQ, but their brain has to learn to work again of the same functions as just picking up a shoe. Some people can't do it. Their mind knows how to do it, but the brain's not telling it, the limbs, how to do it. Everybody has their own way of learning. Another one, allow them to show you what they're trying to do. That's another thing too. And if they're having trouble coming up with the words, because a lot of us have aphasia and things like that, is you have to understand what they're trying to say to you. So you have to be able to go over things and go over and be patient. Well, that's another one here. Be patient and non-judgmental. You don't get aggravated. You don't put them down. You don't judge them ever, ever, ever. Another thing is ask them to repeat back the instructions. When you're going over a question with somebody, and I've done this when I was working in a school with kids with learning disabilities and even with adults of all different kinds of disabilities, is you ask them to do something, they may get it, you want to know that they got the question. So you say, what did I just ask you to do? Here, repeat it back to me. And you can make that fun. You don't even have to make it's like you're putting them down or anything like that. So when you give something instructions, go, what did I just tell you? Because I want to make sure we're both on the same page, teamwork. And you make it more fun and more, learning and working together. If possible, help a person with a disability develop a plan of action. I do this all the time. I say, let's go over short-term and long-term goals, and then I'll ask them, how do you think you can achieve this? And let's write them down. And then you're getting their perspective, how they want to do things, and they're making the rules for themselves. And you said, do you think this is possible? And they say, yes. I said, okay, now you're in charge. They're in charge and they pace themselves at their own rate. And one at a time. You just got to keep refocusing. Let's do one at a time, one at a time. Or we can come back to this later if it's too much. So they could pace themselves, that kind of thing. Does anybody want to say anything? Am I like talking too fast or too much? Okay, we're good. Hidden, this is going to be a good one. And this one's going to touch bases for a number of us because this is a great one. Hidden disabilities, hidden invisible disabilities, common myths. And after we do go over these myths, then we're going to have an open mic. We could sit and chit chat. If you want, I'll stop recording, but I think we can have fun with this one here. Myth number 1. People with disabilities have below average intelligence and cannot learn. Reality. By definition, people with disabilities must be average or above in intelligence as measured by an individual IQ test and have a significant discrepancy between their ability and their achievement. In fact, studies indicate that as many as 33% of individuals with disabilities are gifted. People with disabilities can learn and succeed. It takes proper recognition, intervention, and a lot of hard work. A prime example of this, I worked in a school with kids with autism when I was working for the Board of Education in Jersey. And my wife can attest to this too. She had kids that were born completely mute, never could speak, and they were labeled as autistic and they'll never be able to learn. My wife has taught these kids and now they're college graduates, which means they spoke in class, they did everything they had to. So these preconceived notions that people with disabilities have no ability to learn is completely inaccurate. And I'm so proud of myself for the things I overcome. I never went to college until after I had the brain injury. So it is possible. And it's not like you're too old. Because I was, I think, 38 years old when I went back to college. Something like that. I try to forget my age at this point. I only know one age, and that was I was 31 when I had the brain injury. That's the only thing I remember. After 40, I think you try to forget. Myth number 2. Hidden disabilities are just an excuse for irresponsible, unmotivated, or lazy people. And I heard this just last week. It's a killer. The reality is hidden disabilities are caused by neurological impairments, not character flaws. Disabilities are a permanent disorder that interferes with acquiring, integrating, and demonstrating verbal and nonverbal abilities. People with disabilities process information differently. They just have a different way of learning them. This is a huge one. Huge. I love this whole statement right there. Because people without disabilities have a really difficult time thinking properly. Okay. Myth number 3. Learning disabilities only affect children. Adults grow out of learning disabilities, which is kind of funny because it's like a flip-flop from the last myth. We know that learning disabilities continues throughout an individual's lifespan. We all learn, all of us, different ways, different paths, different forms, and different rates. Some disabilities may intensify in adulthood as tasks and environmental demands change. Many adults have never been formally diagnosed with a learning disability, and many people with learning disabilities are not diagnosed until they reach adulthood. I had a special needs godson that you couldn't have a one-on-one conversation with him about anything. You know, he was low. What do you want for dinner? And he just look at you with a blank face. You ask him anything about astrology, he is brilliant. He'll give you every astronomical form and everything. I mean, it's amazing. But it's when they focus is where they want to focus. It's where their brain, what gets their attention. So it's just a personality thing too. It's where they're interested in, and anybody that understands the autism world would, understands that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a big deal, and everybody, and that's just life. Everybody's different. What interests one person doesn't interest another. So anyway, these preconceived notions are really unbelievable. Okay, myth number 4. Some people with disabilities have dyslexia, so they can't read. I remember seeing this in the schoolroom too. Dyslexia is simply one type of a learning disability. It is a specific language-based disorder affecting a person's ability to read, write, and verbally express themselves. Careless use of the term has expanded it, so dyslexia has become equivalent for learning disability for many people. I know engineers, like chemical engineers, that have dyslexia, but they're brilliant. So it's like that's another. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, okay, next one. Number 5. People with disabilities are quick to reveal their status so they can have an advantage in the workplace. Does claiming a disability become a way of to work the system? That's a question. And I hate this one. Some people want to say they're disabled and they're not because they're just lazy and don't want to work. Here's people, legitimate people with disabilities, and we all know them. People with legitimate disabilities that want to work. They want to do something productive with themselves. They want to have a purpose in life. I hear that all the time. I just want to find something I love to do. I want to, and a lot of us do. We help other people. Nothing is more gratifying to that because they're appreciated. That's me, but that's been me my whole life. The reality is many people with disabilities do not self-disclose when they have one. Self-disclosure is helpful for accommodations to be made as required by law under the American Disabilities Act. This is not in the system if it has been medically documented that they are disabled. You know, people, I think all of us, the majority of us who are disabled want to do something with themselves. I mean, you guys speak up if you want to,
Yeah.
because I am. I never stop. And I always get in trouble because they're like, Mike, why don't you ever calm down? I don't. I
Mm.
wake up grateful I'm alive and I want to make the best of the moment I've got while I've got it here.
Yeah, this is not the end of me.
Right.
Brain
Yep.
injury is not the end of us.
No.
Right.
If you give up, then but that's your own decision. It's not the environment. It's not the world. It's not the government. It's nothing like that. Doing something productive doesn't even mean that you have to do anything, astrologically. You don't have to do anything like world changing. Doing something productive is helping somebody out. It's so simple. I did it in New York. I didn't drive. I didn't have a job, but everywhere I went, I'd help somebody with something. You just keep your eyes open. And I used to do little things just to put a smile on somebody's face. I made somebody else's day. That's being productive, and it didn't cost me nothing. It didn't cost another person a thing. You know, those little things. Common courtesy. Let me see. I think that might have been the last one. Let me see. Nope, number 6. Learning disabilities. This is the myth number 6. Learning disabilities are only academic in nature. They do not affect other areas of a person's life. The reality is, many people with disabilities also have social problems due to difficulties reading body language and other subtle language cues that help most people interact with how appropriately interact with others. This may cause some people with disabilities to have trouble asking for clarifications or contributing to a discussion. This happens all the time. With some people it's not. But visual and verbal cues, when somebody's busy trying to think of what they're trying to say and having trouble coming up with what they're trying to say,
Know it too well.
yeah, there's people don't understand patience when they're, somebody asks you something, you want to say it right. So you're thinking, am I saying it right? Or how do I put it? All those things. I mean, people need to be patient. And that's something that is very, very difficult for the majority of people to do. Everybody's impatient.
It happens to me, especially because I know more than one language, or I knew more than one language before my injury. And then it has happened to me that I forget how to say things in all languages. You know?
Absolutely. I went through the same exact thing because I have multiple languages. When I came out of the coma, I was saying 2 languages. I was talking in Greek and not in English. And nobody understood anything I was trying to say, but it was so frustrating for me. It was horrible. Yeah.
Agreed.
I found after the injury, I'd have conversations with people, and I'd find it very difficult to not understand how to take them or take what they're saying. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
like they would say something, and I wouldn't know how to decipher what they're saying.
Know exactly what you're talking about. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, anybody else want to chime in on this one? I mean, that was the last of the slides that I had to do. So I could stop recording here and we could have a private discussion of our own. Um, unless there's something you guys want to add to share with the public, because this is being recorded. Anyone? No. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I was going to stop recording now then, and I'll take care of this later.